Hello, I am so excited to chat with Gresham today, who is a, I guess, well, consultant or broker with the Franchise Brokers Association. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to hearing, how you have helped entrepreneurs navigate the world of franchise ownership. So I've got a few questions for you today. So I'm interested to learn a little bit more about franchising and the process from a broker's perspective here. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay. I'm super excited as well.
Good, good. So yeah, why don't you just start by telling me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become a franchise consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very much so, I guess, an entrepreneurial busybody. I always joke and say like I feel like I've been interested in entrepreneurship before I even know what it was, and let alone how to spell it. And I still kind of sometimes struggle with spelling it. But at the end of the day, I have had a digital marketing business for the last 11 years. So do a lot of web design support, SEO services for entrepreneurs and business owners. And then also while I was doing that, I'm very much so a big content person. So I really believe that I say everybody is a media company, everybody's in the media business, whether they know it or not. So I've had a blog, I've had a daily podcast myself, lots of video content and information. I've done over 1,600 interviews of CEOs, entrepreneurs,
Oh,
business
wow.
owners, including some franchises. So when I was trying to figure out like what was going to be my next step, next thing that I wanted to do, I really came across franchising and realized I'd worked in a franchise, in the past. So it was one of those things where I felt like it was a niche within entrepreneurship that was a very strong niche, especially for people that are maybe less likely to make the jump and maybe want to take a little bit of a step with a lot more support. So I thought that, hey, this is really great to be able to kind of help what I believe is one of the most awesome things you can do, which is start a business and to try to help people to navigate, that those waters and see ultimately what that looks like. So it was just something that I felt like was very, very strategic and very connected with what I was and am doing. And I felt like hopefully, everything would just kind of take off from there.
Excellent. And to be fair, I can't really spell entrepreneurship either, really, without good
That's
old
what the
spell
red
check.
squiggly line is for, right?
No, that's amazing. It sounds like you've had a lot of great conversations with a lot of great people. So, when working with clients, what is your process for understanding their goals, their skills, and then even like their financial needs before recommending a franchise option to them?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question because I think most of the time when I touch base with candidates, is the first thing they're saying, okay, show me what you have. And I think one of the biggest things that I try to do is not necessarily show me what you have, but tell me more about you. And so I would say the first two calls, we have like an 8-step process, but the first two calls are very much so drilling in and understanding more about the candidate. Like you mentioned, the goals, the dreams, the aspirations, also the skills and the background, and really even we have an entrepreneurial assessment that we take people through just to help people to make sure that they know about themselves. I know more about them, and that helps me to kind of take that step to understand what might be the best, options and categories and concepts that would work for them. But I would say the first two calls is really just, kind of being like a podcast host, I guess you could say, around the person and understanding,
Mhm.
what lights them up, what they don't want to do. And I would say that's probably the most important thing is, of course, we want to know about them and, what, they want to do, but probably what they don't like to do, and trying to understand like how those skills could be transferable. So we have a, big, inventory of over 800 different franchises. And so there's a lot of different options, but I think the most important thing is trying to make sure that it's the correct and the right fit as much as possible. So that's what we try to do in the first couple steps, is just try to understand as much as we can about the potential candidate.
Mhm. I love me a good process. So 8 steps sounds good to me.
Yes.
So how do you evaluate and vet franchises before recommending them to a client? Like what criteria is most important to you?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do and is really understanding as much as I can about the brands, usually before I actually introduce a candidate to to that specific brand. So I try to, set up time to on a weekly basis to try to learn more about those brands. So FBA, which I'm a broker in, Franchise Brokers Association, they do a really good job of bringing a lot of brands to us to present,
Mhm.
to teach us a lot around, what their brand's about, who's their ideal candidate, what their culture is like, just all those like need to know information that helps out when you're trying to make that connection. But I also do a lot of, due diligence on my side. So I've had some brands on the podcast, and that's also super helpful, but also just being able to kind of do that research and information. But I
Mhm.
think when I sit down with a candidate, and usually we've had those first two calls, and then we're looking at the third call where I usually do a presentation. The biggest things that are important, for me, but also I think important for the candidate, is really that culture fit. Of course, we
Yep.
want to make sure that we're really clear on the type of position, the type of franchise that a person's getting into, and that's from a cultural perspective, but also like a good idea of what the day in the life looks like. So you don't want to put a candidate in a place where they don't want to do X, Y, and Z, and that franchise does X, Y, and Z, and that
Mhm.
is not going to
Right.
be ideal for them to succeed.
Yep.
So a lot of what I do is try to understand those things. Of course, the territory, you want to make sure anything you show is available, which is
Right.
usually very, very important.
Very important.
Yeah, so those are important. You want to get an idea of that investment range of whether or not they're going to be able to, they need capital, or they need financial assistance to be able to get to make that happen, or they don't, and kind of just more or less what they're comfortable with is one of the biggest things that we also we want to kind of understand. But those are probably the three biggest things. But I really, just want to hammer home that culture piece, just because I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that I was most excited about, is not just saying, okay, hey, you have X amount of dollars, or hey, this is available in your area, but ultimately, like, I hear this brand and I heard what you told me as a candidate, and it seems like, PB&J and all those things that are go perfectly together when combined, is that's ultimately what I ultimately want to try to do with candidates.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Um, and then I guess, like, how do you tailor your approach for clients with varying financial situations or business backgrounds?
Yeah, well, it's so funny. One of the things I say on my podcast a lot is that, it's a marathon, it's a journey. And I think
Mhm.
that whenever I come across candidates, I really love entrepreneurship. I can't sing this praises alone too much. I say entrepreneurship to me equals hope. And for
Mhm.
me, I feel like it's an opportunity to bring hope to people's lives, where maybe people have been laid off, or maybe they want to add on another business, or maybe they just haven't had a really great opportunity in the job market and they decide that they want to do this. So I think it's an opportunity to really, provide that hope. So with that being said, like, I don't see this as something that you're just doing to kind of check off the box. People are really investing a lot of their time, their money, their blood, sweat, and tears into what could be the business. So I think because that's so important, I want to make sure that I approach it from a long-term perspective. Like I mentioned, the culture fit being such a big thing.
Right.
And I think those things are all important. You never want to make a decision off one thing, but we take these different data points so that we can make that best fit. So again, I'm thinking that if someone's struggling, they may not have the financial opportunities to do it at that time. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're not having conversations and I can't work with
Right.
them, so that it happens in a year or 2 years or whenever they decide is the best ideal. So I'm really into, building long-term relationships, and yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is really good not to just kind of, I guess, like, write someone off just because, like, oh, okay, go have those funding conversations, then come back to me. Like you said, building long-term relationships is very important, especially for something like franchising, because it's, a big deal to a lot of people. They're making a big change. So what would some of the most common misconceptions be that some clients have about franchising? And then how do you kind of, like, address that?
Yeah, I think most people don't realize like how many different options there are in franchising. I think we always hear the McDonald's, your Chick-fil-A's, Seven
Yeah.
Elevens. All those are the only franchises that exist, but that's obviously a huge misconception because, like I
Yeah.
mentioned, we have over 800 different concepts in our inventory, and they're not all equal, they're not all the same. And I think
No.
that's what makes it really beautiful in terms of us kind of being that matchmaker and me trying to figure out more about the candidate. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that, hey, I don't want to own Chick-fil-A or McDonald's, so I don't want to own a franchise. But in reality, there's literally a franchise, I would say, for just about everybody and anybody,
Yeah.
no matter what you're doing, day to day things where we're talking about home service. There's obviously business, services as well too. There's lawn care. There's so many different options that are there that I think, again, that's where I try to spend as much time like learning about the person. But I think that's probably one of the biggest things. I think the next thing is that, kind of along the same lines, I think people don't feel like they are able to own a business. And this is the thing that kind of, to some degree kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because I think that it's a tremendous opportunity. And like I said, I really think it means and equals hope. So I think that just because maybe no one in your family or no one has started a business doesn't mean that you can't do that.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean that you can't find that really great spot. And the thing that I love around franchising is that it's really, in order to go farther, you go together rather than go by yourself. And I feel like franchising is that it
Right.
provides that opportunity that you don't have to do it alone. You do get a playbook. You do get the opportunity to see like how people have succeeded. You can kind of replicate what they're doing to some degree. So I think it's a really great opportunity when you're able to realize that, hey, maybe I'm the only one in my family that's decided to start a business, or maybe everybody talked about doing, but no one ever did it. That was definitely
Right.
my story before I started. So I definitely, feel for that person, but I also want to say that, hey, I'm here for that person, because
Yeah.
you don't have to do it alone. And I think that's one of the big things that makes franchising, awesome and beautiful.
Yeah. That's one thing I always say too, is like if I'm having a call with someone as well, I'm like, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And
Right.
it's really just kind of an easy way to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. No, I love that. Um, well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate you very much taking some time to join me today, and it's just sharing your insights with me. So I know that this will be very valuable information for anyone who is interested in learning more about franchising and business ownership, and just to kind of learn a little bit about what it would be like to be a franchise broker as well. So thank you so much for your time today. I really, really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you too, Lindsay.
Right. All right, we've got Gresham from Franchise Brokers Association. As you know, I've got one question here for you. So what has your experience been like working with Schoolie Mitchell? And what is it about Schoolie Mitchell that makes it attractive to some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in, an entrepreneurship and business for a while. And it's so funny. That was my first exposure to Schoolie Mitchell, going through different networking events and meeting some people there. And I've always kind of seen the people as being really top notch, really professional, just all of the things. And I think having the opportunity now to kind of work with Schoolie Mitchell, and having seen and gone, through some of the process, it's really been really great to see, because I think having so many different brands is really awesome in our inventory, but all brands are not created equal. And I think you look for those people in those organizations that are really having the opportunity to connect, but know that as much as they're taking care of you as a broker, they're going to take care of your candidates as well too. And I feel like everything from Schoolie Mitchell has been top notch. I've had really phenomenal conversations, loads of great information to not just know about the brand, but also know who excels best in the brand, who's that ideal fit. And I think that just helps arm me with the information, but frankly the confidence as well too, to know that if I make a connection, and when I make those connections, that these people are going to be really taken care of. So it's been a phenomenal experience. And I just truly appreciate everything you all are doing.
Well, that's great. Well, good to hear. And we're always open. If you ever need anything, you just let us know. All right, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.